1965 as a first quarter freshman back in the days where we had quarters. Toomer Corner at that time, as it has been for years and years and years, is a gathering place for townspeople, for faculty, staff, and students.
That corner was sort of the gathering place. It just has been, that's the center of town, and that's where most people would go.
That's kind of the rallying point. I've seen churches start programs at Toomer Corner and move on to their sanctuaries from there. It's been a place where people have announced their engagements, have proposed their engagements for marriage and things like that. Even the fact that simple graduations and winning championships have been celebrated at Toomer Corner.
He was known as Shel with one L. We've tried. My brother was also Shel Toomer, and my son is Shel Toomer Hall. And we have to keep teaching everybody that it's just one L. He was born in 1872, which is the same year that Auburn became a college. And one of his great boasts was that he had seen every brick that had been laid on that campus. He was a loyal Auburn man. He was the class of '93. And after he graduated, Auburn was Alabama A&M at that time. And after he graduated, he went to Texas to teach school and realized very quickly that he was not cut out to be a school teacher. So he came back to Auburn and took the postgraduate course in pharmacy and bought the drugstore on the corner, which belonged to B.D. Lazarus. And he went to Opelika and borrowed the money from a man who had Opelika Bank named Leonard Treywick. And my recollection is he borrowed $13,000. And when he came home, he told his mother that he had borrowed that money. And when she said how much, and I think it was $13,000, she says, there's not that much money in the world. But he bought the drugstore. Mr. Toomer lived on West Magnolia, and in a very nice house. It was sort of an English type house, where I think the Lambda Car House is now, somewhere around in there. But he was quite a character. And Miss Toomer was delightful. She was a Canadian, and she taught French in college. He and 8 or 10 other businessmen, and some of them, Cliff Hare, who was a faculty man, who was not a businessman, decided that it was going to Opelika to do your banking was just not the right thing to do. So they organized the Bank of Auburn, and I think there were 10 of them, and maybe no. And somebody served as president during that first year, but Daddy served as president from 1907 till Daddy died in '57. And in '56, he retired as president of the bank, but he was like chairman emeritus or something, and died in '57. And the bank was his, and he used to say, it's my eyeballs. He loved the bank and was so proud of its progress. When the banks were failing, Daddy was so proud of his bank. The Bank of Auburn, because it was strong and it didn't falter. Daddy was he not only was a booster for Auburn University, which was, it was Alabama A&M, and then it was API, Alabama Polytechnic Institute. In fact, my bachelor's degree is from API. And then it was Auburn University. The whole town, he was passionate about the college and about the town itself. And during his time, he was on the city council, and he was on the school board, and he was, did all of that civic stuff to do his part to make Auburn a wonderful place to live. It was a great place to grow up when I was growing up, because it was during the Depression. Nobody had any money, so materialism just wasn't an issue. And the pleasures were all kind of wholesome, but because of the college, there were still pep rallies, and not until the war did we stop having football games. And I think the fraternities decorated their houses when I was a little girl. I can remember that.
And Auburn was fun, There were a lot of cheerleading and things going uptown, but we didn't have the big demonstrations that you see now. No. And started off with a pajama parade. It was at night, and the students wore pajamas. And we would gather around there and yell and cheer and something, but and then maybe go down to the station and watch the train come by.
It was the old South, really the old South.
My father bought the drugstore in 1952 and was the pharmacist here continuously until about 1986. At that time we sold the pharmacy business, and it's been was run as a pharmacy till I think the mid-90s, and then it became what you see here, and that is a great renovated soda fountain and souvenir shop.
You would go up, and for a dime, a very cheap price, we'd go in and see the druggist, and he would come up, or the girl that would work there, it would come up and make a soda for us. Now the fountain, it wasn't a bottle, it was a fountain drink. So the little handle, I remember that the little handles were silver, and they would pull the little handles and the soda would come out, and then the soda was mixed with a cherry syrup, and that was in a little glass bottle, and they would pour it in, and they had these long spoons, and they would stir it, and that's how we got our cherry Cokes.
I love Auburn. It's been a labor of love for me, and subject you want to talk about are the Toomer trees. I can tell you, as a student in the early 60s, I stood on that corner with my dad, who's since passed away. I stood on that corner with my children, who all graduated from Auburn from the time they were toddlers on, and I've stood on that corner with my grandchildren.
Early on there were quotes of the trees being 130 years old. More recent research has indicated that they were probably planted somewhere between 1930 and maybe 1935. There's early photographs. One in particular comes to mind. The first photograph that I've seen with the Toomers Oaks in it was the Orange Bowl celebration, January the 1st, 1938. Auburn beat Michigan State 6-0, and that game still holds the record for the lowest points scored in the Orange Bowl. And there's a classic image there showing a celebration there around the gates, the 1917 gates, and you can look closely and you can see the Toomers Oaks.
I don't remember when the toilet paper thing started, but they used to, and I guess they still do. There's some kind of water-based paint that they would paint the scores on the storefronts, and that was you would assemble at Toomer Corner for pep rallies or for any other occasion. And I said to my daughter, much later, they talk about Toomer Corner at the intersection. The corner is where the drugstore is, and she says, "Well, Mama, you couldn't very well get 5,000 students on the sidewalk in front of the drugstore, the whole thing, she went to Auburn, the whole thing is Toomer Corner now. And that was the place to meet, before and after.
In 1966, I was a fourth grader at one of the schools there, one of the elementary schools there in Auburn. We were about lived about 2 blocks from Toomer Corner. And during the football season, and not growing up in a college town, we realized that college kids would go up to the Toomer Corner, to the Oaks, and would roll the trees. Well, back in 1966, the police in Auburn were not very happy about you being on the trees, being near the trees, and especially rolling the trees. So back then when we would go up, the police would chase us off. The cops were notorious at running us off, and we would climb the trees and throw toilet paper, and then we would run.
You know, the actual year of rolling Toomers and or the trees has never been officially determined. However, Archives has tracked it down to probably the early 70s. And that's because we found pictures, photographs that clearly show people rolling the intersection of Toomers in celebration of a win. And you can see the trees in the background, but the trees have no toilet paper on them. So we know it was going on in the early 70s. And then we believe, of course, it just transferred over to the trees several years later. But that's about as well as we can pinpoint it.
Toomer Corner. In this day and time, Auburn people think about their traditional rolling the trees with toilet paper, that kind of thing. Us old guys remember rolling the utility wires with toilet paper.
And everything around that corner would be rolled, but not particularly those trees, because there were lines, telephone lines, and you could throw on that. And people coming through town didn't know what was going on because they see all this TP around everywhere. And they used to put the fire department used to have to go up there because there was so much TP, they were afraid to get a fire, and they did have some fires up there.
So the tradition of rolling Toomer Corner, the trees at Toomer Corner, is a relatively new thing. Everybody wants to know when the tradition of rolling Toomer Corner began. Well, it was not there in 1971 when Pat Sullivan won the Heisman Trophy. Yeah, we all gathered down there, we whooped and hollered and cheered and had a grand old time. There was no toilet paper. But the next year, in 1972, Auburn played undefeated Alabama, undefeated second-ranked, number 2 Alabama in Birmingham.
David Langer caught it on the bounce at about the 20 and ran it in for the score, and it is touchdown Auburn. Auburn going after it. Here's a good snap. It is blocked! It is blocked! It's caught on the run! It's caught on the run! He's going to score! David Langer has scored, and Auburn has tied the game.
Nobody really gave Auburn a chance. We were 9-1, but nobody gave us much of a chance because Alabama was just so mighty and formidable. Their own radio announcer called them the Redwood Forest. But Auburn did beat the number 2 out of Alabama, 17-16 on the 2 blocked punts. And when you came back, there was toilet paper all over those power wires. You could not go down the street without riding through a blizzard or a scene out of the North Pole. And it was a grand time, but I do not think that rolling Toomer Corner happened as we know it until 72.
And also at that time, back in the old days, used to roll some dumpsters out from behind the building and burn the dumpsters. So we always had to burn the Bulldogs away, whether you beat Alabama or Florida away. The rolling tradition began with just being an away game sort of phenom. All the local residents came together and rallied at Toomer Corner. In recent years, it has grown to the fact that all the people that been to Auburn and been in Auburn want to share that even on home games. So they rally at Toomer's Corner on a victory even at home games now.
I think the coolest thing about Toomer's Corner is there's no other tradition like this in sports anyway. And it's unique and in itself to Auburn. It's just a neat place to pass on the tradition and the passion that goes with college football and with Auburn University.
My name is Jerry Anderson. I came to this campus in 1957. I didn't realize or know where anything was. I used to come down during class, between classes, and come down by the trees and by the corner, go shoot a game of pool, and then come back up, go to my next class. But the trees have always represented some peaceful, long-living, long-lasting thing that I appreciate.
Actually, the tradition started for me when I was a young girl. I've always come to Auburn football games. One of the first times I rolled Toomer's Corner, it was a football victory, and I actually was at the Foy Student Union Center watching the game with my two sisters. And I remember right after the victory, my mom and my dad came to pick us up, and I had actually gone to the bathroom, grabbed a roll of toilet paper, and said, "Let's go to Toomers. I'm ready to go to Toomers." Just because it was such a wonderful tradition I had always heard so much about. So the tradition really goes a long way for me and my family. And Toomer's Corner was just such a wonderful place for the Auburn family to unite after a successful event in Auburn's history. It's a place with wonderful tradition and a place that I definitely hold near and dear to my heart.
If you're an Auburn person, you're welcome. It's no big deal. If you're a person from another venue, another school in the SEC, you're not welcome, and you're ticketed for littering. So you got to be an Auburn person to celebrate Toomer's Corner.
A lot of people don't understand it. They think they're just trees, but they're not just trees. They're part of our life, part of our tradition, part of our family, and that's why it's so important to us.
Come here every game, after every game, and roll this tree right here. And right now we are very sad because some Alabama fan poisoned it and tried to kill it. And I don't know why. It's God's creation, and I don't understand why they wanted to take his creation away from us.
It all began on January the 27th when a concerned Auburn fan listened to the Paul Feinbaum show, and Al from Dadeville called in and indicated that the Auburn fans wouldn't be celebrating victories around the Toomer's Oak much longer, that he had poisoned the trees with a herbicide called Spike 80DF. The Associate Director of Public Safety contacted the Superintendent of Landscape Services, Charlie Crawford. He called me and we began exploring via the internet Spike 80DF. It's a herbicide that is very powerful. It's used for controlling trees and shrubs and other woody plant material, and it has a very long half-life, 12 to 15 months. Long residual in the soil, it moves readily in water, and if you're looking for a perfect herbicide to kill trees, Spike 80DF probably fits that bill. The next morning we went out to the Toomer's Oaks and we collected soil samples. We felt like that we just needed to do that just to address any concerns. But truthfully, we didn't expect the results to come back positive. We collected samples, we took them to the state pesticide residue lab here on the edge of campus, and we turned the samples over to them. Because of an explosion that had occurred in the pesticide residue lab in late December, the samples were sent to the lab in Mississippi, and it took until February the 9th for us to get the results back, and the test came back positive, and that changed everything.
Growing up as an Auburn fan, my parents met at Auburn. My grandfather graduated in 1939, so I've been an Auburn fan for a long time. I remember coming to the Toomer Oaks to roll when I was could barely throw a roll of toilet paper, so I've been coming here for a long time, and being a student here and winning a national championship and be able to celebrate here with all the other students was a special thing. And it's sad to see the condition, and I think all the Auburn family hopes that they survive, and if not, the Auburn spirit will continue to thrive, and I'm sure we'll figure out a way to replace the trees in some sort and continue tradition.
We very quickly formed a task force of experts here at Auburn University. Also included a representative from the manufacturer of Spike ADDF, Dow AgroSciences, and we began developing a plan to how to remediate the damage that was probably going to be caused by the herbicide. We, as I mentioned, we only knew that the herbicide was present in the beds. We didn't know whether it was out in the plaza, Sanford Park, on the City of Auburn property. The first thing that we did, in addition to after taking the first 2 samples and those coming back positive, was to develop a grid system out on the plaza, and we sampled beneath the plaza approximately 35 samples and into Sanford Park with the intention of determining the distribution of the herbicide in that corner of campus. If you look at this second tree here, look at the canopy on it, how full it is, and the dark green the foliage is, and then look at this one right here. This is the one that also is showing signs of poisoning, and what we've had is the loss of leaves. You look at here more closely, you see the yellowing, the interveinal chlorosis, and this canopy is so thin compared to one of the trees behind it. In fact, let's see if I can reach that. You can see right here that almost all of the foliage has fallen off this branch here, and this should not be the case this time of year. We also applied an anti-transpirant to the trees. The movement of the herbicide up into the tree is with the water stream. When the trees would take up water, the herbicide is soluble and it would move with the water that was taken up. And that whole process is driven by the loss of moisture through the leaves of the trees. That process is called transpiration. We put on what was called an anti-transpirant, and basically what it does is it closes or blocks the stomates. Those are the openings on the back of the leaves, and in doing so it prevents or lessens transpiration, and in the process it lessens the uptake of herbicide. Okay, those were 2 things that we did very quickly. We got back the soil test results from sampling in the plaza in Sanford Park, and it indicated that the levels beyond the beds were much lower than in the 2 beds, and it seemed to suggest that the herbicide had been placed just in the 2 beds and not out on the plaza, not out in Sanford Park. This was good news for us because it limited the area that we had to focus on, and that was the reason that we then decided to begin removing the soil only in the 2 beds, not out in the plaza or in Sanford Park. We sampled as we went. When we got those test results back, it indicated that we hadn't gone deeply enough. So we went back in, removed soil a second time with the intent of removing as much of the herbicide as possible. After doing that, we backfilled with clean soil, activated charcoal. We mulched the area. We added barricades to minimize foot traffic around the 2 trees. We've kept them irrigated during summer and fall, which should lessen the impact of the herbicide. But you look at the canopy, there's not much foliage on the trees, but what's there is just recently matured leaves because they've dropped most of the foliage that's yellowed and brown. And even this foliage is not healthy. You see, even though it's immature, you can look up there and you can see some of the brown margins on it. And I mean, the branches are so sparsely foliated that I'll be surprised if these trees leaf out in the spring.
Right now, there are no specific plans in place of what exactly to do with our current oaks when they die, because actually we probably don't like to talk about it quite in that way just yet. We still have experts that are working very hard to still save the trees, and while the chance of their living is very small, our people are not going to give up. So we're not ready to start talking about taking the trees down. Even if the trees continue on the path that they are on right now, which is not good, they'll still be up in the fall. The tree's not going to just fall down. Yeah, it will probably have less and less and less more leaves, but I estimate that this coming fall we'll still be rolling that tree, and it'll be after the next fall of 2012, I think, when we'll really have to look at what the next step's going to be.
Heads up! Oh! You got shot War Eagle. War Eagle! War Eagle, baby! Woo!
I graduated here in 06, and obviously, every time the big football game or a math, chess tournament, whatever the occasion, it was time to roll Toomer Corner, and that's just always a great tradition I remember. I remember going to football games with this guy when I was a little kid, and we parked over here at the Methodist Church, and I remember it being such a long walk to the stadium, but on the way back getting to see the pomp and all this good stuff taking place. It just was an amazing thing to see. So Auburn is a very special place to us, and hope to come to many more games and have kids one day that come down here and do the same thing. So War Eagle, War Eagle.
It means a lot to me. Everyone comes out here, gets together as an Auburn family, gets to enjoy throwing the toilet paper up. So it's one of my favorite things here at Auburn.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gary Keever, G-A-R-Y-K-E-E-V-E-R. I'm in the Department of Horticulture, and we're here at the Toomers Oaks. This morning, Dr. Stephen Enlow behind me and Dr. Art Chapelka and I have gone up in the lift to examine the trees. Our objective was to look at the structural integrity of the wood, determine if there's dead wood up in there, and try to assess how much dead wood there is, and also to examine the new foliage to see whether signs of herbicide poisoning was present or not. That whole branch is dead. You can tell the difference between live and dead wood by looking at the cambium, this layer of cells just underneath the bark. This shoot right here is obviously alive based on the new foliage that we have on it here. And by simply scraping the bark, we see that green coloration beneath the bark. This tissue is very much alive. And that's in sharp contrast to this branch right here. And just by looking at it, you can feel that it's a much drier wood, and it's because it's desiccated. As wood dies, it loses moisture. And as I scrape across it, you can see that there's nothing but brown tissue. So this shoot is dead. And we looked at the canopy. There's some sizable branches that are already dead up in the tree, but there are also many new shoots forming, new leaves developing that aren't showing any signs of herbicide poisoning. On March the 26th, we're bringing a company in from Tennessee, and they're going to inject the trees with a sugar solution. Okay? You might ask, why would you inject the trees with a sugar solution? Well, the trees capture sunlight in the form of carbohydrates via photosynthesis. Spike ADDF or tebuthyrine inhibit photosynthesis, so the trees aren't able to capture that sunlight, and over time they deplete any carbohydrate reserves that are in the tree. So we hope to inject these sugar solutions into the trunk. The trees take that solution up, translocate it to the foliage, and hopefully supply some of the food energy to sustain the trees for longer. Okay?
They're filled with the same Auburn spirit that all of us are filled with, and that they're going to make it, and that's what Auburn's all about. You just keep fighting, and they look beautiful.
Today we're injecting sugar solutions to try and help increase the chances of the Toomer Corner oaks to survive their herbicide attack.
The first thing that we've done is to drill into the base of the tree and use a manometer to measure the tension in the trunk of the tree, and that gives us an indication of the amount of transpiration that's currently occurring. We're now measuring the diameter at breast height and calculating the number of injection sites that we'll need to make, because the number of injection sites is based on the diameter of the trunk. So they're setting up the tubing. They're going to have probably 40 injection sites on this tree, and they'll first test it. They'll have to prime it and then test it with water before using the sugar solution. The intent of the sugar solution is to replace some of the carbohydrates that aren't being formed because the herbicide has blocked photosynthesis. So what we hope to see is that the trees continue to grow. You know, we're looking at the first emergence of foliage this spring, and we're hoping that growth will continue on through spring and into summer as a result of this sugar injection. We hope that it'll take it all up. At this point, based on the condition of the trees, I think that the potential for good far outweighs any damage to the trees. It's just that last year, one of our criteria for doing anything was to do no harm, and we just had to be careful. You know, we've drilled maybe 40 holes in the trunk of this tree this morning, and that's not a sound practice, you know, but it's necessary to get the sugar solution up into the canopy. I mean, we're willing, you know, it's all what we're doing is we're weighing risk versus return, and the potential for a greater return that certainly exists now. And last year, you know, we were battling the herbicide, and we really didn't know what effect removing soil twice had. So, you know, we really didn't want to go in and drill holes in the trunk at that time. If this tree will take up all of that, you're going to give it to it, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
absolutely.
I probably need to be thinking about making it more solution.
Yeah.
Would you think, or is it too early for that?
No, I would go ahead and do that. If you're going to add more solution for this tree, I would go ahead and prepare it. So you're thinking.
In 20 liters of solution, we put 120 grams of fructose, 120 grams of glucose, and 60 grams of sucrose. Okay, I thought that if we got 10 liters in each tree that we'd been doing good, but we're already past that on the College Street tree, so we're going in the right direction. Some of that is up probably in the foliage already, or at least it's up in the upper part of the canopy.
This might be quick.
See, it's pulled by transpiration, and by putting that 25 gallons in over what, would it take 3 hours?
3 hours.
3.5 hours? 3.5 hours. It doesn't take moisture that long to get from the root zone up to the top of the tree in the xylem. So there's probably some of it up there, and then it's got to cross membranes and to get into the foliage. So I think that
I would expect us to begin to see some effects within a week to 10 days. I hope.
Well, with this tree here, it's got a covered root collar. What I'm going to have to do is excavate it slightly to expose it so I'd have better injection sites for the macro infusion in order for better uptake of the material on this tree. You know what, Jim? That's where we did one of them holes for the manometer.
I know. You got two of them here, Tom. You got one here, and they're both leaking.
Yep.
See what's happening, I think, is that these holes that we drilled in to get an idea of the tension in the trunk of the tree, the transpirational stream, is that the solution that's being injected lower is passing through this zone, and some of it's leaking out of those holes. That's what I think is happening, and it's showing up with these wet streaks along the trunk. It is, because as Tom mentioned, it's a good sign because it indicates that the solution is moving upwardly. And if we've been injecting, say, for 40 minutes, and we know that it's already up roughly 3.5 or 4 feet,
we're making progress.
We are. So
we put 25 gallons of sugar solution by macro infusion into the large tree. We put about just under 20 gallons into the smaller tree. The hope is that by pumping these sugar solutions into the tree, that it will stimulate and continue to stimulate the flushing of the leaves on the trees, so in turn they will produce more sugars themselves, and that the leaves will outlast the herbicide that's in the trees.
Throughout the 2+ years that I've been involved in trying to save these trees, I've interacted with countless people, and I've been encouraged repeatedly and thanked for the efforts that Auburn University has made to try to save these trees. They've been an integral part of Auburn's celebration of sports victories for probably about 25 or 40 years.
This ain't the last road. We'll be here, and we're going to roll and roll and roll and roll this corner.
You have heard it said that nothing will be the same here in Auburn after these trees come down. Well, I say to you, there's more to Auburn than 2 oak trees, revered and sturdy as they are. These oak trees are but an outward and visible symbol of what's in the Auburn heart. You've also heard it said that today is a day of mourning. But I say to you, this is a day of celebration and remembrance. A time to celebrate all the good times we've shared here in the years past. Great victories, even graduations, engagement, the whole of the Auburn experience, and remembrance of the people we have shared those times with. As William Faulkner said of mankind, I say of Auburn, I decline to accept the end of Auburn. Auburn will not merely endure, Auburn will prevail. A writer named John Dryden a long time ago said, I am wounded, but I am still here. Let me lie down by the side of the road, and I will rise again and fight you again.
Today's kind of conclusion of a couple of years of remediation work, trying to save the trees. A lot of work went in by a lot of people trying to make sure that we did everything we could to save the oaks, and obviously in the end it wasn't possible. Everybody keeps talking about, what a bad thing this is, and we've made tremendous strides to make sure good comes out of this. And it's a bad situation, but in the end, there will be good because Auburn students are going to benefit from this. The people that worked on remediating the corner and worked on saving the trees worked so hard, so they worked hard. All the people that came out today to put this together. Over the last couple of years, people have worked extremely hard.
There's a new design coming, and thanks to all of y'all, you've had a part. Thousands and thousands of suggestions, many landscape companies, and we get the opportunity, Harrison, to unveil the new design for Toomer's Corner. And one thing I will guarantee you is there will be live trees on this corner. So, let's see what it's going to be. War Eagle.